Hello there, my name is JD from Studio 2105. Welcome back to MixStream Online and yet another episode of Weekly Update Wednesdays. In this week's video, we're going to be taking a look at the question of vocal booths and what are the pros and cons behind them. First of all, a warm welcome to all the new viewers to this channel and a big shout out and thank you to the patrons who help to support the channel financially. If you're new to this channel, please head on down and click on the subscribe button and don't forget to click on the notification bell as well so that you be updated every time I upload a brand new video. Sign up for the email list, link is down in the description. Do consider as well to sign up to become a patron. Well, patrons help to support the channel financially. You can do so by heading down to this link, www.patreon.com/studio2105. Lots of special perks and benefits. Head on down and check it out, okay? In case you missed it, I just put out an unboxing video of the Samsung Satellite USB and iOS broadcast microphone. But not only that, I'm also giving away this microphone to one lucky viewer out there, okay? Now, we're running this contest all the way until the 14th of March to find out how you can win yourself this microphone, right? Head on down to the video, watch the video, okay? Right, all the information, all details are gonna be in there, okay? So go and check it out. Without any further delay, let's head on down to this week's featured question. What are the pros and cons of a dedicated vocal booth? Alright, this is a great topic for discussion. Now, I've had the experience and the opportunity, right, over the years to have worked in many different environments. Now, I started out way back in my ICOM days during college from my home studio in my apartment bedroom. Then moving on to, I had the opportunity to work in a world-class recording facility, SYNCHROSOUND Studios, right? Back in the early and mid 2000s. And then of course now, right here in Studio 2105, my own place, I have a Studio A which has got a control room and a live room. And I've also got another Studio B which has its own dedicated vocal booth. So, right, I like to think that I've got a good perspective on this topic, having both worked, right, in a very simple home, studio environment, right, like many people who are doing nowadays, right, to a world-class built and designed a studio facility and into something a little bit more, right, a middle ground, which is like in the studio. So thanks to recording technology, right, becoming more affordable, right, and more and more music is now being made from home now, okay? Now, it doesn't help, okay, that things have obviously been accelerated by the pandemic and various lockdowns in many countries all over the world, okay? Now, but then back to the question of vocal booths. You see, there's this image of recording artists who are famous singers inside a vocal booth. That's almost become a kind of a stereotype. That's it's reinforced by what we see in YouTube videos, in websites, and all the audio and the trade magazines are right. You always love to have that photo inside the vocal booth. Now, this kind of sometimes implies that, that if you want to record a professional sounding vocal, it means you need to have a dedicated vocal booth. And right, that's not necessarily the case now. Before we go any further, I do suggest that you take a look at this video, okay? This is the Acoustics 101 module that's taken from the Direct Access 1.0 Music Production Workshop series. I suggest that you go and study this module first, check it out, okay? And then come back and watch the rest of this video. Okay, welcome back. Hopefully you have already checked out the Acoustics 101 video. Now let's ask ourselves these questions. Do we really need a vocal booth? What are the pros and cons? And what are the pitfalls that we need to avoid when deciding whether or not to build one? Let's start with the advantages. Number one, Isolation. Now I prefer to use the term isolation booth or ISO booth for short because that is in fact its function. Now, it's not only used for just recording vocals. You can, use an ISO booth to record instruments. You can use it to even isolate, let's say, guitar or bass amps or any other sound source, okay, that needs to be isolated. Hence the name. Now, if your studio is located in a noisy environment, for example, maybe there's a lot of heavy traffic noise, or it's located near an airport, or right in the direct path of, air traffic, or even like say machinery noise from maybe an adjacent unit or an adjacent building, a vocal booth can offer the isolation that's necessary. It can give you a dry sounding recording by removing most of the room reflections. Now I say most because not all, okay, and I'll get to that point later. Okay, so this can be very helpful because having too much room ambience, you can't really easily remove it, and you can actually complicate things later during the mixing process. It is much easier to start with a dry, clean sound than a roomy one, of course, okay? With a roomy sound capture, you're kind of stuck with it. Then you can have to work a little bit harder to make the part blend with the rest of the tracks like in the mix lab. And now to the slightly longer list of cons and disadvantages. The number one disadvantage, small vocal booths sound bad. We learned in Acoustics 101 that the smaller the dimensions of the room, the more acoustic problems will arise, due to standing waves and nulls caused by phase cancellation. But wait a minute, you might be asking, I've got all the acoustic panels and foams all over my vocal booth. That should kind of solve and fix the issues, right? Now, this is where you may be a little incorrect. Okay, acoustic foam, is only really good at absorbing mid to high frequencies, okay? Whilst, let's say, rock wool fiberglass panels, although they will perform better than foam, they still don't do as much for the low frequencies, okay? For that, you need bass traps, Helmholtz resonators, and other sort of acoustic treatment solutions as well. Now, in fact, applying too much treatment will result in a BOXY sounding vocal, okay? So the problems associated with the BOXY sounding vocal is, it can be around the range of 300 to maybe 600 or 700 hertz. Okay, so this frequency, is kind of where the fundamental, the root note of where a typical vocal that's being sung, that's where it resides, it lies around there, okay? So it causes those notes, it causes those bunch of frequencies to be uneven. Now you think that, okay, I can use EQ to cut out those, those problematic BOXY frequencies, right? Well, not really, because as we know, when you use EQ to subtract it, unfortunately, it will cause that issues because that's exactly where the vocal lives, okay? Those range of frequencies. It is also highly likely that there will be some phase cancellation, again, because the room dimensions are very, very small, inside a vocal booth, okay? It will cause some phase cancellation at certain frequencies. Now, phase cancellation will result in something that we describe as a hollow sounding vocal. Now, there are many who, swear by, their closet their wardrobe, some microphone isolation products, such as reflection panels and those funny looking ball things, okay? And while, yes, it does help to, keep room reflections to a minimum, you got to be aware that they also introduce other problems, such as boxiness and some phase cancellation. Now, I have read many comments and it's been discussed ad infinitum on Facebook and many of these different Facebook groups, okay, recording and audio groups. So many people of them can't hear what do we mean or what I mean by boxy, hollow sounding, or phase cancellation, slightly out of phase issues. Now, again, I'm not being critical out there, but these are things which need to be trained. You need to actually train your ears to be able to hear these kinds of issues. So yeah, again, I have personally tested some of these similar reflection filter products. I personally don't really like the way it sounds. Like I mentioned, okay, it causes and brings other issues and other problems, right? Instead, your mileage may vary. Now, if you are perfectly happy with the results that you're getting in your recordings, okay, then by all means, okay, just go ahead and use those products. Well, just that from my personal experience, right, they haven't really given me very satisfactory results. Now, the second disadvantage, ISO booths take up a lot of space. Now, isolation can be achieved only with a combination of mass and air gap. Okay, once again, please refer to Acoustics 101. Right, click on link to watch that video if you haven't done so already. So an effective vocal booth, right, it uses a room within a room design, right, in which the inner walls, right, the floating floor, you even have a ceiling as well, are separate assemblies from that of the actual building itself. Okay, now without going into complicated math calculations, right, now this simply means that you need very thick walls, right, and sufficient separation between the, right, you need an air gap between the inner and outer wall assemblies if you really want to achieve proper isolation. Okay, now which leads me to the third disadvantage. Number 3, ISO booths are expensive. Okay, now you need a large quantity of building material to build a proper ISO booth, right? So you could go the DIY route, okay, to save you some of the costs, okay, or you can also buy those prefabricated ones, but shipping them over, they are pretty large. Shipping costs are going to be really expensive. Okay, now but if you get the design, if you get the building process wrong, okay, so for example, okay, you improperly mount some of the inner boards, the drywall boards, the gypsum boards or whatsoever, or even if you incorrectly calculate the amount of load on the floating floor, you just make one mistake somewhere, it just renders the entire thing useless. So right, I hate to say this, but there's this saying which I always like to say when I talk to musicians and bands. Okay, there are easier ways to flush your money down the toilet lah. Okay, last but not least, a small ISO booth can feel very cramped and claustrophobic, and not to mention can get a little bit stuffy if you don't have proper ventilation, if you don't have proper air conditioning. Right, for example, here in Malaysia, we need air conditioning because of our temperature. Okay, now I've worked with many singers, and this is a topic that there are many people who will argue otherwise. But in my experience, I've worked with so many singers over the years, right? And most of them have always told me that they always prefer, a bigger, a more open, a much more spacious space to record, right? That's why I do most of my vocal recordings out in this live room out there inside my Studio A, instead of inside the vocal booth inside my Studio B, even though in theory you're supposed to get a much cleaner and drier vocal inside a vocal booth. What I do instead, right, in my live room is that I utilize like movable gobo panels, right, to partition off a area. So I create a dead zone around the singer. Okay, a little bit of room sound, right, well controlled room sound can be actually beneficial to the recording. The reason why is that it can actually give a bit of a sense of 3D-ness. It has that 3D depth to the recording, right, especially vocal. So having a bit of 3D-ness helps it to sit inside and mix a little bit easier lah. Now don't get me wrong, okay, a clean dry vocal is also important. Now for instance, if you are mainly in the business of recording voiceovers, ADR, right, dubbing, a dry, clean vocal, that is absolutely a must lah. So in conclusion, one must take into consideration several factors before deciding on whether or not to build a vocal booth. Do you really need one? Or will employing other solutions give you equal or better results without having to spend the money lah, okay, right? money is something that you really need to consider and think about, especially in these times. Okay, now for example, right, perhaps you could just record in the control room, right, or in your bedroom, like how I did back in the day, right, with headphones. Do you want a vocal booth because it looks impressive? Okay, or do you genuinely need one because you have to deal with isolation issues, like as I mentioned earlier? Okay, traffic noise, environmental noise, etc. Are you willing to spend the time in getting the details right? The details here meaning the design process, the actual building of the vocal booth itself, not to mention the cost. I spent 1.5 years on forums doing research, talking with consultants, right, with my designer before, right, even embarking on my Studio B project, okay, which has its own vocal booth. So well, maybe you don't need to take 1.5 years to come up with the design and all that, but make sure that you put in the time to make sure you get those things right. Because earlier, as I mentioned, one mistake, all right, something, an error in the design or an error in the construction will just make the whole thing useless. Okay, it can render the entire vocal booth ineffective. These are the things that you need to be wary of. Now, I highly recommend visiting the John L. Sayers Recording Studio Design Forum. Okay, this is the resource which I used when I was designing my own studio and Studio B as well. This is, right, by far the best resource. And if you only need to ever go to one place on the internet for anything related to studio design, or studio building, all right, okay, anything to do with constructing bass traps and all that, okay, this is the website that I recommend to you, right, the John L. Sayers Recording Studio Design Forum, right. Leave the link down in the description below. Okay, it can be for anything, right. It's not only for building commercial studio spaces. Even home studios, right, will find a lot of great information there. Okay, hopefully, right, this little thing which I've shared with you, right, regarding the pros and cons of a vocal booth will help you make the decision. Alright, this brings us to the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. Okay, please do leave your questions and your feedback down in the comments below, right? Let me know what you think, right? Do you have a vocal booth? Do you want to build one? Or if you have questions that you want to ask me directly, right? Some advice, some further advice on how I designed and built my vocal booth, right? Feel free to get in touch with me. Okay, I can build it, get you in touch with some suppliers and builders and contractors here locally in Malaysia, right? If you are watching this from Malaysia, of course, yeah, I'll be glad to help to answer your questions further in detail. Okay, now once again, right, before I sign off, remember the giveaway is going on for the Samsung Satellite USB mic. Again, go and check out the video, right, and the link is going to be down in the description below as well. Send in your submissions, right? Okay, if you found this video useful and informative, please do leave a like, do share this as well, right? It will really help with the YouTube algorithm. If you haven't done so, please become a subscriber. Okay, click on the subscribe button, click on the notification bell, sign up to become a patron if you want to support the channel financially. www.patreon.com/studio2105. Okay, all right, till next time, I'll see you again in another video very soon. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy, take care. All right, happy recording and mixing. Peace, love, and music.